I clicked send on my grocery list at 9:43 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, my heart thumping like a drum solo played by someone who'd never seen drums before. Mom had just texted me again, "Remember, you're not wife material. You need to take life seriously." She had been saying this since I was 16, like it was a birth certificate detail that somehow got officially documented by the universe. I was 26, determinedly single, and ridiculously proud of my tiny bakery called Skylar's Sweet Surrender. My name is Skylar Moore, and I make cakes that taste like birthdays, cookies that remind people of childhood, and pastries that make grown adults weep with joy. Mom wanted me to date doctors and lawyers and men who wore suits that cost more than my monthly rent. I preferred dating dough and spending Friday nights perfecting my croissant recipe. I laughed so hard at her text that I nearly dropped my phone into the chocolate ganache I was stirring. The batter would have been ruined, but at least it would have tasted like irony. I texted back, "I'll marry a croissant then. At least it won't criticize my life choices." She replied within seconds with a thumbs down emoji and 3 exclamation points, which in mom speak translated to, "I'm deeply disappointed but maintaining composure." I could practically hear her sighing through the phone. Humor 1, heartbreak 1,000. I decided to treat her opinion like burnt cookies, acknowledge it existed, throw it out, and bake something better. Mom called that night, her voice syrupy with unsolicited advice and what she probably thought was maternal concern. "Skylar, sweetie, you need to find a real man, a professional, not someone who smells like flour and works odd hours like you do. You need stability, a house in the suburbs, someone who can provide properly." I replied while piping frosting onto cupcakes, "Muffins don't cheat, Mom. They're also more reliable than most of the men you've tried to set me up with." She laughed that particular laugh that meant she found me amusing, but not in the way I intended. "Find someone who can afford to buy you diamonds, not someone you have to buy donuts for." I rolled my eyes so hard I saw my future, probably alone with 17 cats and a bakery that smelled like cinnamon and independence. I promised her I would date seriously, but I crossed my fingers behind my back like I was 12 years old lying about finishing my homework. She seemed satisfied and changed the subject to her book club, which apparently had very important opinions about everything from literature to proper marriage timelines. I went to bed that night dreaming of frosting and fortune, not fortune and fortune. There was a difference, I told myself. I was building something real, even if Mom couldn't see it through her very specific glasses that only showed success in the form of wedding rings and joint tax returns. Months passed in a blur of early mornings and late nights. Mom set me up with bankers who talked like spreadsheets come to life, lawyers who discussed prenuptial agreements on first dates, and a dentist who spent 40 minutes explaining proper flossing technique while I seriously considered faking a medical emergency. I bored them all with bread puns and cake jokes. One banker, whose name I forgot immediately because he had the personality of unseasoned oatmeal, actually said, "You're funny, but you're not really wife material. You're more like girlfriend material at best." I laughed, paid for both our dinners because he'd conveniently forgotten his wallet, and left. I decided to stop auditioning for a role I didn't want in a play I never agreed to be a bin in. I focused on my bakery with the intensity of someone who'd found their actual purpose in life. I worked on perfecting new recipes, making people laugh with cake designs shaped like their worst fears, surprisingly popular for divorce parties, and staying up until 3 a.m. creating sugar flowers that looked so real bees got confused. My best friend Zara, who worked as a graphic designer and had opinions about everything, told me I was aggressively avoiding romance like it was gluten and you were severely allergic. I told her that was the most accurate thing anyone had ever said about me. She brought me coffee and told me love would find me when I stopped looking. I told her love could stay lost because I was busy. But then, on a random Friday in October when the leaves were doing that thing where they pretend to be on fire, a new customer walked into my bakery. He was tall, quiet, with eyes the color of stormy seas right before lightning hits. He wore an expensive suit like he'd forgotten he was wearing it, and he looked at my display case like it contained secrets to the universe instead of just really good pastries. He ordered a croissant and asked, with the hint of a smile, "Does this come with extra laughter? I've had a terrible week and need something that tastes like joy." I liked him immediately. We joked about calories being fake news invented by people who hated happiness. He laughed. Actually laughed, not that polite chuckle people do when they're being socially appropriate, and left a tip that was bigger than my rent. I stared at the $100 bill for 5 minutes wondering if he'd made a mistake or if rich people just did this thing casually. I forgot to ask his name, but I remembered his smile and the way he'd closed his eyes while taking the first bite of the croissant like it was a religious experience. That night I dreamed of stormy eyes and $100 tips, which felt both weird and oddly specific. He came back the next day, same time, same order, same joke about calories. "I'm starting to think you're stalking my baked goods," I told him while bagging his croissant. "I'm starting to think your baked goods are stalking me. They followed me home yesterday and demanded I come back." I laughed so hard I snorted, which would have been embarrassing, except he looked delighted by it. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing and everything: the weather, the best time to eat cake, always, whether croissants counted as breakfast or dessert, both, and why most people were afraid of buttercream. Cowards, all of them. I started waking up early just to make sure I looked presentable by the time he arrived. My heart felt like dough rising, slow, steady, completely unstoppable. Zara noticed immediately. "You're wearing actual makeup before 7 a.m. Who is he, and when do I get to interrogate him about his intentions?" I told her to mind her business. She told me that as my best friend, my business was literally her business. We argued about this while piping frosting onto a wedding cake shaped like a castle, which felt appropriately ironic. After 2 weeks of daily visits, he finally introduced himself properly. "Leo Rain," he said, extending his hand like we were at a business meeting instead of a bakery that smelled like vanilla and hope. "Investor, coffee addict, and apparently now addicted to your pastries and terrible jokes." I shook his hand, trying to ignore how my heart was doing acrobatics. "Skylar Moore, baker, joke teller, and apparently drug dealer for croissant addicts." He asked about my dreams, my plans for the bakery, what made me choose baking over any other career. Not once did he ask about my dating history or whether I wanted kids or any of the invasive questions Mom's setup dates always started with. I told him I wanted to bake cakes that made people forget their diets and their problems, even if just for a few bites. I wanted to create joy and edible form. He listened like I was describing the cure for cancer instead of just really good buttercream technique. Then he laughed so hard at one of my jokes that he spilled coffee on his expensive tie. I offered him to bake him a new tie out of fondant. He said, "Marry me instead." I laughed, my heart doing that thumping thing again, and replied, "I'll think about it after I finish this batch of cake. Priorities." We started dating, though it felt less like dating and more like we'd been friends for years and just now realized we should probably kiss about it. He brought me flowers that smelled like hope and possibility. He showed up at the bakery at closing time to help me clean, wearing his expensive suit and looking ridiculous with an apron that said "Kiss the Cook" that Zara had given me as a joke. We danced to music from my phone while washing dishes, and he'd spin me around like we were in a movie instead of a bakery that smelled like tomorrow's bread and today's sugar. Mom asked about him casually during one of our weekly phone calls. "So, this boy you're seeing, does he have a real job?" I could hear the skepticism through the phone. "He's an investor, Mom. He invests in businesses and helps them grow." There was a pause. "Does he invest in your little hobby bakery?" The way she said hobby made my teeth clench. My bakery is a business, not a hobby. And no, we don't mix business with our relationship. She sighed like I just told her I was joining the circus. "Dreams don't pay bills, Skylar." I looked around my bakery, my profitable, successful, bill-paying bakery, and replied, "They do if you bake them right." She sent a thumbs down emoji. I saved it to show Leo later. We'd laugh about it together. Leo and I baked together on lazy Sundays. He was terrible at it, which made him even more endearing. Flour flew everywhere like the world's most chaotic snow globe. He wore aprons like they were superhero capes. I wore my jokes like armor against the world that said I should be something other than what I was. We laughed until the oven timer cried for attention. He never talked about money, his or mine, only about flavors and future plans and whether we thought dogs could taste sweetness. He believed yes, I believed absolutely yes. I learned things about him slowly, like reading a book one page at a time. He'd grown up poor, built his wealth from nothing, and understood hard work in a way that Mom's setup dates never had. He didn't brag about money or success. He just existed in his life comfortably, helping small businesses grow, investing in dreams that banks called too risky. He thought my bakery was brilliant, not a hobby. He thought my ambition was attractive, not threatening. He thought my jokes were hilarious, not a defense mechanism, though they absolutely were, but he loved me anyway. 6 months into dating, Leo kneeled in flour, actual flour that had spilled during a baking session gone chaotically wrong, and asked me to marry him. He held a ring that sparkled like sugar crystals catching sunlight. It was perfect and completely unexpected, and so him that I started crying immediately. I cried so hard that I ruined the cake I'd been decorating, which was supposed to be for a customer, but instead became a casualty of emotions. I said yes through tears and laughter and shock. He spun me around in the flour snow that was our bakery floor, and I felt like a queen wearing a crown of jokes and joy and butter that probably needed to go back in the fridge. We called Mom that evening. I was nervous, my hands shaking like I had consumed my body weight in espresso. "Mom, I'm engaged." Silence. Long, calculating silence. Then, "To the investor boy?" Her voice was careful, neutral, giving nothing away. "His name is Leo, and yes." More silence. "Does he have insurance? A 401k? Have you discussed financial planning?" I closed my eyes and counted to 5. "He has me, Mom. That's what matters." She sighed so deeply I felt it through the phone. "Love doesn't pay bills, Skylar." I replied, keeping my voice light. "It does if you laugh right and work hard." She sent a thumbs down emoji. I framed it later. Leo thought it was hilarious. We planned a small wedding. Cupcakes instead of a traditional cake, because who gets to decide these rules anyway? Laughter instead of stuffy traditions, and decorations that sparkled like sugar crystals. Mom video called to discuss details, her face on my phone screen showing varying degrees of concern. "It's not very classy, is it? Cupcakes feel very casual." I responded while piping frosting. "Classy is kindness wearing sprinkles, Mom. People will remember feeling happy, not whether we followed arbitrary dessert rules." She rolled her eyes so hard I heard the future. Her at my wedding, judging every detail while secretly having a good time. Leo squeezed my hand and whispered, "Your mom is going to love everything once she sees it." I loved his optimism even though I knew better. The wedding day arrived like a well-timed joke with perfect delivery. I woke up nervous and excited and terrified that something would go wrong. Zara was my maid of honor, running around making sure every detail was perfect while also making inappropriate jokes that made the photographer laugh so hard she nearly dropped her camera. Mom arrived wearing disapproval like expensive perfume, her eyes scanning everything critically. The venue was a garden that I had chosen because it reminded me of frosting roses. The decorations were simple but beautiful. The cupcakes were arranged in a tower that sparkled under string lights. Mom's expression was unreadable. Leo wore a tie that Zara had given him as a gift. It was dark blue with tiny embroidered smiles on it, subtle enough to look professional but personal enough to be perfectly him. I wore a dress that sparkled like sugar crystals, simple and comfortable and very me. We wrote our own vows, which Mom had initially protested. "There are traditional vows for a reason, Skylar." But we'd insisted. I promised to make him laugh every day, to burn croissants occasionally, but always with love, to support his dreams while building mine, to be his partner in every way that mattered. He promised to always taste test my creations, to dance with me in the kitchen, to spin me around like we were in a movie instead of a bakery that smelled like tomorrow's bread and today's sugar. Laughed through our vows, through tears, through the flour that somehow ended up on my dress because Zara had thought it would be funny to sprinkle some during photos. Mom watched from the front row, her expression slowly softening like butter left in summer sun. After we kissed and everyone cheered, Mom came up to me with tears in her eyes, actual tears, which I'd seen maybe 3 times in my life. She whispered, "You look happy. Really, truly happy." I felt my own eyes filling up. "I am happy, Mom. This is what happy looks like for me." She almost smiled, a real smile, not the polite one she used for her book club. Maybe I was wrong about the wife material thing. I almost dropped my bouquet. Maybe? After the wedding, Leo surprised me by driving us to a house I'd never seen before. It was beautiful, modern but warm, with huge windows that let in light and a kitchen that looked like it had been designed specifically for someone who baked for a living. "Welcome to forever," he said. watching my face carefully. I cried so hard I ruined my makeup and probably looked like a raccoon who'd lost a fight with mascara. He laughed and wiped my tears with his tie, the one with the tiny smiles, and told me he'd been planning this for months. The house was ours. He'd bought it, renovated the kitchen, and kept it secret because he wanted to surprise me. I felt like a queen, wearing a crown made of sprinkles and joy and the kind of love I'd stopped believing existed. We settled into married life easily, like puzzle pieces that had always fit, but just needed to find each other first. Leo worked from home most days, taking calls in his office while I worked at the bakery. We'd meet for lunch, cook dinner together, fall asleep watching terrible reality TV while arguing about who was the villain. It was ordinary and perfect and everything I'd never known I wanted. Mom called weekly, her tone gradually changing from skeptical to curious. "How's married life?" she'd ask, like she expected me to report problems. "It's great, Mom. Really great." Silence. Processing. "That's good. That's very good, sweetie." 3 months after the wedding, Mom asked to visit. She'd never asked before. She'd always assumed she could just show up, so the formal request felt significant. She arrived on a Saturday morning carrying a casserole dish and what looked like forced optimism. Leo greeted her warmly, shaking her hand, making small talk about her drive. I watched them interact, waiting for judgment, for criticism, for something. Instead, Mom looked around our home, the photos on the walls, the cozy furniture, the kitchen where Leo and I clearly spent most of our time, and something in her expression shifted. Leo served her lunch, a simple meal we'd made together, nothing fancy but made with care. We ate on the patio overlooking the garden, talking about safe topics like weather and local news. Then Mom asked, "Leo, what exactly do you do? Skylar mentioned investing, but I don't really understand what that means." He explained his work patiently, talking about finding businesses with potential, helping them grow, providing capital and guidance. He talked about the bakery he just helped expand, a small family business that couldn't get a traditional bank loan. He talked about the restaurant he'd invested in that employed formerly incarcerated people. He talked about work like it was about people, not just profit. Mom listened, really listened, her expression showing surprise and something else I couldn't quite identify. Then she asked, "And Skylar's bakery? Did you help her too?" Leo smiled at me before answering. "Skylar's bakery was already successful before we met. She's brilliant at what she does. I just occasionally eat too many samples and give feedback, which mostly consists of, 'This is amazing,' and 'I'll take 12. Mom looked at me then, really looked at me, like she was seeing something for the first time. "Your bakery is doing well?" I nodded. "We're actually expanding next month, adding a cafe section with seating, and I'm hiring 2 more bakers." Mom's eyebrows rose. That's wonderful, Skylar." After lunch, Leo offered to show Mom around the property. While they walked through the garden, I cleaned up and tried not to eavesdrop on their conversation floating through the open window. I caught fragments, Leo talking about how proud he was of me, how hard I worked, how my ambition inspired him. Mom's responses were quieter, harder to hear, but her tone sounded different, softer, almost warm. When they came back inside, Mom asked if she could visit the bakery. "I haven't actually seen it since you first opened. I'd like to see what you've built." The next morning, Sunday, when the bakery was normally closed, I opened it just for Mom. I showed her around, the commercial kitchen with equipment I'd carefully saved for and purchased, the display cases, the ordering system, the wall with customer thank you cards and photos of cakes I'd made. I showed her the expansion plans, the sketches for the cafe section, the business projections that showed steady growth. Mom walked through slowly, touching surfaces, reading cards, looking at photos. "You built this," she said finally. It wasn't a question. "I did, with a lot of hard work and very little sleep." She nodded slowly. "I never really understood. I thought you were just playing at business. I was wrong." I wasn't prepared for that. For the admission, for the vulnerability in her voice. "Mom," she held up her hand, "let me finish. I was wrong about a lot of things. I thought you needed to marry someone successful instead of being someone successful. I thought your bakery was a hobby because I didn't take it seriously. I thought you weren't wife material because you didn't fit my very narrow definition of what that meant. But I was wrong. You are wife material. You're partner material, business owner material, amazing daughter material, even when I didn't deserve it." She was crying now, actual tears streaming down her face. I started crying too.
We hugged in my empty bakery, surrounded by the smell of tomorrow's bread and the weight of words that had needed being saying for years. That night, Mom stayed for dinner. She and Leo laughed together about something while cooking. I watched from the doorway, feeling like I'd entered an alternate dimension where my mom actually liked my life choices. We ate together, the three of us, and it felt like family in a way it hadn't before. Mom told stories about my childhood that she'd never shared, about how determined I'd been as a kid, how I'd insisted on baking my own birthday cake at age 8, even though it had turned out lopsided and underbaked. "You were so proud of that cake," she said, smiling at the memory. "You made everyone eat a piece, even though it was essentially raw batter." Leo laughed. That explains so much about her personality. Before she left the next morning, Mom hugged me tight. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "I should have said that years ago. I'm proud of your business, your marriage, the life you've built. You did it your way, and it worked better than my way ever could have." I cried into her shoulder like I was 16 again, but this time from happiness instead of hurt. She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "And Leo is wonderful, very handsome, very kind, and clearly adores you. You chose well." I laughed through my tears. "I know, though, for the record, I would have married him if he was broke." She smiled, a real, genuine smile. "I know, sweetheart. That's how I know you chose right." Months passed. Mom visited regularly now, usually bringing casseroles and staying for dinner. She and Leo had their own relationship independent of me, texting about recipes and stock market tips and random articles they found interesting. She even started bringing her book club to the bakery for their meetings, introducing me to her friends as my daughter, the business owner. The pride in her voice made me emotional every time. She even started wearing one of my bakery t-shirts, bright pink with our logo, around her neighborhood. Zara found this hilarious. "Your mom has merch. That's character development." One day, about a year after the wedding, Mom showed up at the bakery, wearing an apron. I called ahead and asked if you needed help today. I thought I could learn a bit about what you do. I almost dropped the tray of croissants I was carrying. "You want to help in the bakery?" She nodded. "If you'll teach me?" So I did. We spent the day baking together, flour flying like forgiveness through the air. She was terrible at it. She kept over-mixing things and adding too much of ingredients, but she laughed at her mistakes and tried again. We made cookies that were slightly burnt and croissants that weren't quite right, but we made them together, and that made them perfect anyway. She wore laughter, like a new dress she'd just discovered fit perfectly. I wore acceptance, like a crown I'd finally earned. We worked until the oven timer cried for attention, until we were covered in flour and tired and happier than I can remember us being. When we cleaned up, Mom said quietly, "You know what I've learned? Wife material isn't about finding someone to take care of you. It's about being someone who knows how to take care of themselves and chooses to share that strength with someone else. You taught me that." I cried so hard I ruined the batch of cookies we just finished. She hugged me, flour and tears and all. We became mother and daughter in a new way that day. Not the relationship we had before, but something better. Something built on respect and understanding instead of expectations and disappointment.
2 years after the wedding, my bakery had expanded again. We now had 3 locations, 20 employees, and a wholesale business that supplied coffee shops across the state. Leo's investment firm had grown too. He now had a team of people helping him identify and support small businesses. We were featured in a local business magazine as the couple building dreams one investment at a time. Mom had the article framed in her living room, which she showed to absolutely everyone who visited. The bakery hosted a women in business event, and I'd been asked to speak about entrepreneurship and following unconventional paths. I'd asked Mom to come, expecting her to sit in the audience. Instead, when I arrived, the organizer told me there'd been a program change. My mother had asked to introduce me. I found Mom backstage, wearing an apron over her nice dress, our bakery logo across the front. "Is this okay?" she asked nervously. "I called and asked if I could say a few words before you spoke. I have things I need to say publicly." I nodded, too emotional to speak. We hugged, and then it was time. I watched from the side of the stage as Mom walked to the microphone, looking nervous but determined. "Hello, everyone. I'm Patricia Moore, Skylar's mother. A few years ago, I told my daughter she wasn't wife material. I told her she needed to focus on finding a husband instead of building a business. I told her that success looked like marrying well, not baking well. She paused, her voice getting stronger. I was wrong about everything. My daughter taught me that wife material is showing up every day to build something meaningful. It's working hard and staying kind. It's choosing a partner who respects your dreams instead of someone who funds your dependence. It's wearing kindness like sprinkles, sweet, colorful, and making everything better. The audience laughed at that. Mom smiled and continued. I spent years trying to fit my daughter into a box that was never meant for her. She broke out of that box and built her own life, a beautiful, successful, joy-filled life. She married a man who treats her like the capable, brilliant woman she is. She built a business that employs 20 people and brings happiness to thousands. And she did it all while I doubted her. Her voice cracked. I'm here today to tell you all, but especially to tell my daughter, I'm sorry I didn't believe in you sooner. I'm proud of you beyond measure. And you were right. Dreams do pay bills if you bake 'em right. The crowd cheered. I was crying. Mom was crying. She gestured for me to come up, and we hugged on stage while everyone applauded. We stood there, mother and daughter, wearing flower and forgiveness and pride. My speech after that was probably terrible because I could barely see through my tears, but people told me afterward it was moving. I talked about believing in yourself when others don't, about building the life you want instead of the life you're expected to want, about the importance of people who eventually come around and admit they were wrong. I talked about my mom's growth, about Leo's support, about the community that had embraced my weird little bakery. I ended with, success isn't about meeting someone else's definition of what your life should look like. It's about building something that makes you proud and brings others joy. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, the people who doubted you most become your biggest supporters. After the event, Mom, Leo, and I went to dinner at a small restaurant we loved. We toasted to growth, change, and buttercream that held up in summer heat. Mom told embarrassing stories about my childhood. Leo told embarrassing stories about our early dating days. I laughed until my face hurt, surrounded by the two people who loved me most. We took a selfie, the three of us squished together, smiling like fools, flowers still visible in Mom's hair from the bakery that morning. Mom posted it on Facebook with the caption, "My daughter, my son-in-law, and the life I didn't know to want for her, but am so grateful she built anyway." Life continued forward. The bakery kept growing, Leo's firm kept succeeding, Mom kept visiting, kept learning to bake, kept wearing her bakery apron with pride. We celebrated birthdays and holidays together, the three of us and Zara and whoever else we'd collected along the way. We laughed more than we argued. We supported each other through hard times and celebrated victories together. We became the family we had chosen to be, not the one we'd been assigned. 3 years after the wedding, Leo and I talked about expanding his business into a more formal mentorship program for women entrepreneurs. Mom immediately volunteered to help, using her book club connections and decades of social networking to find potential applicants. I spent years judging women for their choices, she told us during a planning meeting. I'd like to spend the rest of my time supporting them instead. She threw herself into the work with the intensity of someone making up for lost time. She interviewed applicants, helped write business plans, connected people with resources. She was good at it, really good, in a way that surprised all of us, probably including her. One evening, Mom and I sat in my bakery after hours, eating imperfect cookies we couldn't sell, but tasted delicious anyway. I've been thinking, she said, breaking a cookie in half, about all the years I wasted worrying about the wrong things, about how I could have been supporting you instead of criticizing you. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You're supporting me now. That's what matters. She smiled, tears in her eyes again. She cried a lot more now, but they were good tears. I just want you to know that even when I was terrible at showing it, even when I said all the wrong things, I always loved you. I just didn't know how to love you the right way. I was crying too now. I know, Mom. I always knew. 4 years post-wedding, we'd settled into a rhythm that felt like home. Sunday dinners at our house with Mom always attending, random week 8 texts with jokes and memes, holiday planning that involved all of us instead of Mom dictating from a distance,
business consultations where Mom's perspective actually helped. A relationship built on mutual respect instead of unmet expectations. Leo told me one night, lying in bed after one of our chaotic family dinners, "Your mom has become one of my favorite people." I laughed. 4 years ago, I would have told you that was impossible. He kissed my forehead. People can change when they're given the chance and the reason to do so. My bakery now supplied desserts for Leo's business events, which Mom attended as both Leo's guest and my unofficial PR person. She'd walk around telling people about my business with the enthusiasm of someone discovering sliced bread for the first time. "That's my daughter's cake. She built a business from nothing. 3 locations now. 20 employees. Have you tried the croissants? They'll change your life." She'd hand out business cards I hadn't asked her to carry. She'd book catering orders on my behalf without checking my availability first. She'd become my most aggressive marketing agent, which was both annoying and incredibly sweet. 5 years after the wedding, Mom organized a surprise party for the anniversary of my bakery opening. She'd coordinated with Zara, Leo, my employees, and approximately everyone I'd ever met. The bakery was packed with people. Customers, friends, family, business partners, random people from Mom's book club that I'd met once. There were speeches about my journey, testimonials from employees about what working at the bakery meant to them, even a video message from the woman whose wedding cake was the first major order I had completed. Mom's speech was last. She stood up, wearing her bakery apron like armor, and said, "5 years ago, I didn't think this business would last a month. I thought my daughter was making a mistake. Today, I know the only mistake was mine, not believing in her sooner. Skylar, you proved that wife material means building your own life and choosing someone to share it with, not finding someone to build your life around. I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that, and I'm grateful you let me be part of this journey anyway."
I ugly cried through her entire speech. Leo held my hand and whispered, "Your mascara is running." I whispered back, "I don't care even a little bit." We celebrated late into the evening, eating cake that definitely violated health code limits for sugar content, but tasted like victory and vindication. Mom danced with Leo, then with me, then with random guests she just met, but was already best friends with. She was happy, genuinely, radiantly happy in a way I'd never seen her before. Or maybe I had seen it years ago, before life had made her hard, and she was just finding her way back to it. Now, 6 years after the wedding, our lives look nothing like what Mom once wanted for me, and everything like what I wanted for myself. The bakery is thriving. Leo's business is expanding into new cities. We're talking about starting a family, which terrifies and excites me equally. Mom has become an essential part of both our businesses and our lives. She volunteers at the Women's Entrepreneurship Program 3 days a week. She taste tests every new recipe I create, offering honest feedback that I've learned to value. She's Leo's first call when he needs advice on anything from investments to what gift to get me for birthdays. She's transformed from my harshest critic to my biggest champion. And that journey, hers and mine, feels like its own kind of success story. Last Sunday, we were all in my kitchen. Me, Leo, Mom, Zara, and a few friends baking together in chaos and flour clouds. Mom was telling a story about how she used to think successful women were women who married successful men. I was so wrong, she laughed, flour on her nose. Successful women are women who build their own success and choose to share it with people who respect that. She looked at me, like my brilliant daughter who I'm still apologizing to for being obtuse for so many years. I threw a dish towel at her, laughing. You're forgiven. You've been forgiven. You made it to the other side of understanding. She caught the towel and wiped her eyes. Thank you for waiting for me to get there. We finished baking as the sun set, creating cookies that were imperfect and delicious and made with love. Leo put on music, and we danced in the kitchen, all of us, flour flying like snow in a snow globe made of forgiveness and growth. Mom spun around with her arms out, laughing like she was 20 years younger, and said, This is what happy looks like. I just couldn't see it before." I hugged her tight, feeling grateful for second chances and stubborn determination and the long journey from disappointment to pride. "I love you, Mom." She squeezed me tighter. "I love you too, sweetheart, and I love the life you built.
All of it. As everyone left that night, full of cookies and joy, Leo and I cleaned up the kitchen. He washed dishes while I dried, a comfortable rhythm we'd perfected over years of practice. "Your mom has come a long way," he said, handing me a mixing bowl. "From texting you that you weren't wife material to organizing surprise parties and wearing bakery merch. That's character development." I laughed, putting the bowl away. The best kind of character development, the kind where everyone wins. We finished cleaning and stood in our kitchen, our home, our life, surrounded by evidence of the evening's chaos and joy. Leo pulled me close, and we slow danced to no music, just the sound of our breathing and the distant hum of the refrigerator. "Thank you," I whispered. "For what?" he asked. "For seeing me when I didn't think I needed to be seen. For loving me exactly as I am. For making my mom like you enough to change her mind about everything." He kissed my forehead. "Your mom changed her mind because you never changed who you were. You just kept being brilliantly, stubbornly yourself until she finally understood what that meant." Later, lying in bed, I thought about the journey, from my mom's disappointed texts to tonight's laughter and flower-covered joy. I thought about the girl I'd been at 16, hearing for the first time that she wasn't wife material, and the woman I'd become who'd built wife material out of hard work, humor, and refusing to fit into boxes that were never designed for her shape. I thought about how the best revenge against people who doubted you wasn't proving them wrong. It was building something so beautiful, they eventually wanted to be part of it. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. "Thank you for tonight. Thank you for letting me be part of your life even when I didn't deserve it. Love you, my brilliant baker girl." I smiled and texted back, "Love you too, Mom. See you next Sunday. Bring your apron." She sent back a heart emoji and a croissant emoji, which made me laugh because months ago I had to teach her what emojis were, and now she was fluent in pastry-based emotional expression. The story of how I went from not wife material to married, successful, and surrounded by love wasn't really about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving myself right, that I knew what I wanted, that I could build it myself, and that the people who truly loved me would eventually come around to supporting rather than doubting. It was about patience and boundaries and staying true to yourself even when voices you loved told you that yourself wasn't enough. It was about Mom's journey too, from rigid expectations to flexible understanding, from criticism to celebration, from trying to shape her daughter into someone acceptable to accepting her daughter exactly as she was. That transformation didn't happen overnight. It took years, mistakes, awkward conversations, and the willingness from both of us to meet in the middle. It took me standing firm and Mom learning to bend. It took showing each other grace when we stumbled and celebrating when we got it right. 6 years, 3 bakery locations, 1 amazing marriage, and countless hours of therapy later, I understood that being wife material was never about being perfect dinners or suppressing your ambitions or finding someone to complete you. It was about being whole on your own and choosing to share that wholeness with someone who respected it. It was about building a life you were proud of and inviting people into it rather than molding yourself to fit into someone else's vision of what your life should be. And sometimes, if you were very lucky and very patient, the people who had doubted you most would show up wearing aprons and admitting they'd been wrong. They'd become your allies instead of your critics. They'd wear your merch and brag about your success and finally see you for who you'd always been. That felt better than any "I told you so" could ever feel. That felt like winning. Not because someone lost, but because everyone involved had grown enough to understand what mattered. My bakery, my marriage, my relationship with Mom, all of it was proof that you could be soft and strong simultaneously, that you could make cupcakes and run a business, that you could fall in love and maintain your independence, that you could forgive people who hurt you without forgetting the lessons they taught you, that wife material was whatever you decided it was, and for me, it was flour-covered hands, early mornings, terrible puns, and a partner who thought all of that was not just acceptable, but wonderful. The next morning, I woke up early as always, kissed Leo, who was still sleeping, and headed to the bakery. The sunrise painted the sky in shades of pink and gold that reminded me of frosting colors. I unlocked the door to my business, my successful, thriving business that Mom once thought was a hobby, and smiled. The ovens warmed up, the coffee brewed, the day began like every day began, with flour and hope and the knowledge that I'd built this life myself, one croissant at a time. And somewhere across town, my mom was probably waking up too, pulling on her bakery t-shirt, maybe texting her book club about her daughter's business, or planning her next visit, or thinking about how wrong she'd been and how grateful she was to have been proven wrong. We'd both come a long way, her from rigid expectations, me from defensive independence. We'd met somewhere in the middle, in a place built of understanding and respect, and love that looked nothing like what either of us had originally expected, but felt better than anything we could have planned. Wife material, I'd learned, wasn't about being what someone else needed you to be. It was about being what you needed yourself to be, and finding someone who loved that person. Everything else, the success, the growth, the healing, the joy, that was just flour and sugar and time, mixed together with patience and baked until it rose into something beautiful. And if people doubted you along the way, well, you could either let that stop you, or you could let it fuel you to bake something so delicious they'd eventually ask for the recipe. I chose the latter, and 6 years later, standing in my bakery as the morning light streamed through windows, I'd make that same choice again, every single time.